Welcome to the Scaleup Valley podcast, where we bring the best of the best to help you scale your business from 1 million to 1 tree. Today we are living very special days. So we are going through a pandemic crisis, and we will help you navigate wartime, leverage the crisis to grow, to scale up, or to adjust, scale down in order to scale up later. But our focus will be not on the fear, on the obstacle, but on the vision and on making things happen. Today we have a very special guest to help us to mitigate how do we navigate this wartime and how do we scale up our companies. His name is Rob Sperring, the Vice President at Würth Elektronik Group. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike.
And let's get to know a little bit more about yourself and more about your career and then more about the company as well.
Okay. So
would you mind to just let us know a little bit more about yourself and what you have been doing in your career?
Well, my early career started probably not as you'd expect. I'm ex-military, so I spent 8 years in the military. I worked in military aviation. So in reality, I think this gave me a very unwittingly, but very, very good leadership understanding, which in a crisis environment, I think is paramount. It's very, very useful. And obviously I work for a technology company, so being trained live on weapon systems, there's no plan B. You get it right first time.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So we are talking about that you are leading a company that has revenues north of 14 billion, almost 80,000 people worldwide. That's another kind of scale. So what we consider in our podcast going from 1B to 1 tree. It's a joke because there is no company in the world that has already achieved the 1 tree in annual revenues dollars. So the largest one at this moment, if I'm not wrong, is Walmart with $500 billion. So 540 or something B around that. But anyway, getting from 0 to 14B, it's a long way. The company was born in 1945, exactly after World War II, which was also a huge crisis. What can you present a little bit more about the stage of Europe in terms of scale to the audience?
I think the company, like you're correct, Reinhold Würth took over from his father, Adolf Würth, post-Second World War. Very, very humble beginnings. But the values he created back then, honestly, they are still fairly much prevalent in all aspects of our business today. So it was about service, and being a service leader. Mm-hmm. It was about doing your best to motivate the people with you. The adage, we're all in this together, is absolutely right. And it was finding, as always, a niche in the market. Mm-hmm. And from this niche, developing it and servicing it properly. And when you've done that, then the natural thing is to expand the product range within that niche. And this is pretty much how the company grew. Yeah.
Very, very good points. And in terms of avenues to scale, we always discuss the typical 2 avenues. So growth, organic growth, or growth via acquisition. And we had an interesting discussion one of these days about another channels, namely internationalization. Would you like to share some of your thoughts on the topic, or another ways to scale a company at this stage of scale, which is already a giant?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've covered this topic quite well in the past, Mike. And the idea of organic growth and acquisition, it's always a mixture. And I think you have to go a little bit with your gut instincts when it's the right time to go in which direction. I think most companies, they can be successful in terms of developing their business and their operation at a national scale. And this typically for, I guess, a lot of companies will be in the fiscal range of 30 million to 50 million, an enterprise of this nature. I think the main stumbling block, the biggest challenge after this is internationalizing and your business. And it's very hard to do that in today's environment because a toe in the water approach is really very, very difficult. Most of your competitors these days appear to be giants. As you mentioned, Walmart, or it could be your Amazons or whatever it's going to be. So a toe in the water approach is really not the right way to go. And unless you have a lot of capital behind you, this is difficult to do. I think the main challenge for companies to do this is to do with communication. You know the values in your own country, you understand the culture, and culture is communication and vice versa. But the rules subtly change when you try to internationalize, and it's a different playing field. And to recognize that very early on and to adapt to that very early on and to get the right partners for your organization, which you can share really good common values and really understand intrinsically the business model and how it can adapt to, and it will need to adapt slightly in a different flavor to the next nation. This is key to success. And most companies would either have to borrow heavily to finance this, or at this point, they would go down the floating the company if they haven't done already to generate the necessary revenue. And I think latterly, you've seen companies even the size of SoftBank making mistakes in terms of doing exactly this. So what seems like an obvious venture to start with, I think needs a lot more analysis before you actually do this.
Absolutely. Very, very good points. And we come to the moment of the show where we start discussing the three critical ingredients to scale, or that are even more important. And now I need to be careful with what I will say, because I'm in front of an expert on wartime. So,
well, no, I wouldn't go that
far. So number one is radical focus. Number two is world-class leadership. And number three, culture of execution. As the community and the audience knows, we keep co-creating those three ingredients with our guests. And starting with number one, radical focus. So it's very tempting to believe that we are already big enough to start opening too much the avenues of growth and trying to do too many things at the same time. So having a good balance between focus and diversification and expansion, and understanding the right timing to expand, is really critical for success and for failure. So how do you assure that you keep the focus, you keep the core of the company, but at the same time, you do the bets, take the risk to create the future of the company? We had on the show recently a company called Fujifilm, where we discussed this. So Fujifilm started with in the photo imaging industry with Kodak. And today, the photo imaging industry represents 15% of the revenues of Fujifilm. So the same technology was applied successfully to other industries. Of course, they needed to do this in a certain pace, in a certain timing, this diversification, but keeping the technology from photo imaging, keeping the core there, apply it to another vertical. So coming back to the long question, and sorry for that, it's how to keep the focus, but at a certain time also preparing the future and taking the risk and the right timing to keep expanding the business and scaling the business.
I mean, this is a really good question, and I don't mean to be vague in the answer, but it's not a straightforward answer. And I think you have to understand the environment you're operating in to do this properly. You, as always, will have key competitors in your market space, and this will determine with the amount of aggression you want to go into the marketplace. Sometimes it's good to go in almost at a stealthy angle and just nibble away, and sometimes you may want to go after key business sectors or elements and choose to go very aggressively. Again, I think you have to understand the finances of your business, and to expand your business, you need to expand your people. And depending on the complexity of your product, and depending on the complexity of the market you're going to, and what I mean by this, is this direct sales? Are you using distribution, etc.? These will all be elements to consider at the rate you go forward. In the case of Würth, I've worked on both sides. I've worked in distribution, and I've worked as an OEM.
Right.
Distribution gives you very quick, fast gains, but you lose control of your pricing further down the line. If you do it direct sales, this gives you hard to get market penetration quickly because you don't have visibility across a wide range. You don't have the shop window that you have in distribution. So I think it's very, very important to understand your balance sheet. And you need to understand, because most of this will be achieved by marketing or via salespeople. So you need to understand your CM2, contribution margin 2. So you take into all aspects of running salespeople, at what point you make profitability out of a salesperson. In my industry, you can say it's technology. So the gestation period for a design-in, and hence when you start to get the production, can be anything from 12 months to 3 years. So you have to understand the return on this investment very, very clearly. And we typically want, well, without giving too many secrets away from Würth, I think you have to understand the rate, the speed at which the general trend is running of your business, the growth, and you have to understand what margin you need in terms of profit against what it costs to run the guy as to how fast you bring on the next salesperson. So typically anywhere between 30% profit you're getting out of this person now and up to maybe 200%. Then you multiply, sell division. You bring another person over into that area, they take over half the customer base, and you start accelerating forward in this format. But again, to understand fiscally how your balance sheet is working and understand how your strategy within the market is critical to do this correctly.
That's an amazing point, and it kind of introduces immediately the second key ingredient to scale, which is world-class leadership. So you just shared a lot of skills that an amazing leader needs to have, and this is really not easy. So amazing people skills. We tend to say that starting up, it's all about sales, but scaling up, it's all about recruiting. So recruiting is the most important muscle to scale a business. And having that intuition, that feeling, that process in place to assure that we attract the best of the best in the industry, so we can play to win with clarity, with the best strategy ever, but also adjusting quickly to that strategy with execution feedback, and keeping the eye on the vision and having a vision for the long term, the mid-term, and the short term with clear goals and clear KPIs is critical. And so how do you ensure that you have the right people on the right seats for each stage of growth?
Well, I don't think you can ensure this. That's the bottom line. And when you're starting out and you're breaking into a market, you just aren't able to attract the best of the best. I mean, that's just the reality. Even if you could afford that person, I mean, how do you attract them into your operation?
Right.
Most people have to go via an agency to do this. And a lot of agencies, they will have their main customers as well. And their biggest customers, the one that spend the most revenue with them, and you're starting out, so that's not you. You don't get first pickings of the best candidate. So this is very, very difficult. And if you want to go down, I mean, in the last decade, it was more common to use platforms like Monster or whatever other recruitment platforms there are. These days, it gets a little bit easier with the likes of LinkedIn, etc. But again, you have to know a little bit about how to operate within social media to make your company look attractive to fresh talent.
Right.
And I think this is a really, really key aspect. And this will depend on your market as well. And it also depends on the clients that you're working with. If it's a more mature industry, there's no point. You have to analyze if is bringing in a Y generation or a Z generation person going to interact best if your clients are okay boomers like myself or whatever. So there's a lot of considerations to do in that. But if your client base is mixed and of all ages as well, we always operated on the fact, and quite successfully as well, that we would look to people that had 2 of 3 main ingredients. So a minimum of 2. So 1, you would have the technical understanding already of the type of product you're selling. So in our case, electronics. 2, you would have an industry knowledge and broad industry knowledge. So you would already have a network within the industry. And the 3rd one, which was right on the tip of my tongue, forgive me for a second now. That's embarrassing, it just escaped me.
No worries. So
yes, it was having, the sales experience, already having the right sales experience. So
right.
You can, if you have 2 of those ingredients already, it's not so difficult to really develop the 3rd one. But if you only have 1 of those ingredients, then it can be done. Later on, you may be wanting a very, very deep technical person as a field application engineer. Then you have the time and the resource to develop the 2 other aspects. But when you're starting out, you don't have that time. So you have to hunt very, very carefully. And quite often, going for somebody that maybe comes from a similar type of competitor to yourself, that has done very, very well internally within the organization, but they're hitting a ceiling within that organization. And they want to do field sales, but they just won't let them have that opportunity. And these are very good people to entice over to your outfit and give them the leash, give them the chance. And by and large, if you do this and you manage their expectations correctly, you will end up with a very hungry, motivated, and very capable young person.
Mm-hmm. This is all very interesting aspects. So sometimes, and talking against myself, we believe that things are white and black, right? And right. Something very interesting inside a large corporation and even within a scale-up is that we also need to start up some businesses. You were talking about opening new markets, and we have different companies inside a larger company in different stages of growth that require different leaders and different teams to move those businesses to the next level. It might be business units, it might be different subsidiaries, it might be different geos, different regions. So it's very interesting that some of the knowledge that comes from startups, venture-backed ones, are also very important to large organizations, and why we discussed in the show these different stages of scaling from 1 million to 100 million, then going for IPO or getting an exit, moving to 1B, and then entering the giant path to the 1-3. So, and you have opened a lot of markets, and you lead a very large region with very different cultures. So how do you adapt your strategy, and how do you adapt your leadership skills to such different cultures, such different regions, and such different stages of growth of those companies or teams?
It is a really good question, and I'll be honest, I found this very difficult initially, and it's not something which you can just fly at and think you can get right. I mean, there's various online tools you can get where you can say, okay, I'm an English person, I'm looking to break into the Australian market, and that might seem culturally very aligned. You can go on online tools and you can find out, actually, that isn't so aligned. There's a common-ish language, but the values are different. The fundamental values are different in terms of how you conduct business, how you interface with people. So I would actually recommend, without promoting one particular tool in general, looking at that. And this will give you a very clear understanding how people understand hierarchy, how they understand the pace of business, whether you just want to dive straight into a business conversation, which would be most appreciated in some cultures, or in other cultures, you can't get started till you've had a coffee. I mean, there's no way you can start, possibly even on the first meeting, you're not going to get past social graces. So understanding some fundamental rules like that is, I would say, initially important. I think you have to be open. You have to be very honest, very authentic. And you hear a lot more about authentic leadership these days. And honestly, this is the best way. If you try and bring people on or work with people and you're not straight with them from the day one, no matter how good an actor you are, you will get caught out, and this will damage your business. So authenticity is a key element to how you want to go forward. And being honest about the expectations you have with people. If you're setting up an operation in another country, don't just say, I want to hit this target by then, this target by then. Manage what you honestly think is reasonable in the first year. Maybe even underestimate deliberately if you can afford to, and let that person over exceed the target on the first year. The second and third year, they will understand how good it felt to already be a winner, and you're much more likely to grow faster in the second and third years doing this. So yeah, I think that would be the best advice I could give at this point in time.
This sounds amazing, and it is also, I love the two components of your experience, which is authenticity and honesty about the results and expectations, and being super clear about what means a successful relationship and a successful result for our partnership as leaders. Something that I see is really, and especially in those times of crisis, is repeating the mission, the vision, and the values. So these absolutely are the moments where we see character. And repeating the vision, it's not only the vision of the company, it's translating the vision of the company and how it connects with the vision of each leader that is in the business. And the best leaders ever are the ones who are able to pull and inspire people to go in the direction in the vision, and going in the direction of the common vision, they are also achieving their own vision. And so it's a win-win relationship for everyone. And the ones who can touch our hearts are the ones who talk about us, not about themselves. And usually we forget to really talk about the person that is in front of us, and make them special, unique, and why their role, why the role, and why that's the mission, why the role is so important to achieve the vision that we all together want to get. And maybe we can introduce here a little bit of flavor of the current situation that we are all facing in business, from large enterprise companies to SMEs, small business, anyone. How a leader should help to keep the team engaged, focused, and moving into the direction of the vision, keeping the vision in mind and adjusting, understanding that this is just another step to the Everest. So we might need to go a little bit down and scale down a little bit and get ready to scale up again later.
Yeah, if I understand your question correctly, Mike, we hear a lot about visions these days and having a very, very clear vision. And absolutely, you must have that. But I could imagine as well, when my boss first said to me when I was setting up the UK, what is your vision for the, and I was like a rabbit in the headlights. I was a very good salesperson, and I was very confident in my abilities to go forward and develop the project. But all of a sudden being challenged with this idea of having to have a vision, this was not overly natural to me. Right. I think if you're a very small outfit, it's okay to start with, to have a goal. You know, as you get more and more success, as your business starts to flow, then you'll understand a little bit more maybe about how your business can evolve. And it may not evolve exactly in the direction you set out for it to evolve. And that's also okay. You don't have to be so dogmatic and pin yourself down in the original direction you set off in. We had many times a particular product range which we thought was going to be, you know, it's going to go gangbusters, and we put a lot of resource behind it. And no matter how we pushed that, there was just and we set a vision about it, we set a goal about it, just went in a slightly different direction. Exactly. And that's really okay. You can relax a little bit, I think, from time to time with this. And particularly when you're small, and you can, like I said, you have a goal, have an understanding, a clear understanding of what the key elements are to achieve that goal. And as you become more and more successful, your idea of what a vision is and how that was going to look like for you, and how you can communicate that to your people. This is more of an organic type evolution. This is not something you can just buy in and plaster all over your business, because honestly, I don't think that will work.
Very, very interesting. Amazing. And thanks for challenging me back again, because I need to work on that. I believe that things need to be in a certain way, and I'm working on myself there as well. And we come to the third ingredient, the culture of execution. So if we have clarity of vision, if we keep flexible, that's where I need to learn. If we have the right people on the right seats for each stage of growth, now it's about having the system of execution, the rules of communication that you were talking about, the dailies, the weeklies, the monthlies, ensuring that the cross-functional alignment is there. And nowadays we are all going to remote mode, which is amazing, but it also creates with the cause, with the fear, and being remote without being in the same office, it becomes even more complex to first avoid miscommunication, and ensure that communication happens, and second, that we are progressing and adapting to wartime as quickly as possible in just one direction with just one voice.
So if you take the current climate as an example on this, you need to, and this is a military doctrine, you need to react very, very quickly. You need to recognize where you're at very, very quickly. You need to understand that things are changing. And you need, first off, to prepare yourself that you need to change. Unless you understand that intrinsically yourself, your team are not going to understand that. So that's paramount. When you do then take on a slightly different strategy, which I guess all of us have had to start thinking about, or hopefully have already done in the last several weeks, how to communicate that effectively to your team. First off, if you have managers, you may be a small operation, you may be directly communicating this to the team. You may have middle managers in between. You have to have everybody on board. Your next row of people have to be totally on board with what you're doing before you set the statement out further. So they have to be part of the decision-making process. You can be very, very clear in your own mind how you want to do it, but you must listen to your people as well, particularly if you're already international, because from my point of view, I'm English, I could see crystal clear how this would start running in the UK. Nonetheless, I brought my managers in, discussed it with them, and they were like, yeah, well, you are English, Rob, but you've lived in Spain for the last 5 years. I think you missed a trick or two here. I took their feedback, and because in the end, they're the ones that have to deliver it at their end. And it was the same in Spain, the same in Australia, the same in India, etc. So to start with, everybody has to be on board with the new strategy and how you do this. And this turned out to be daily calls, video calls. This is what we're doing. How is this running? And getting feedback from, we call the pit face, from the people which are actually out there delivering your message to the customers. The communication flow here has to be very, very good. And I wouldn't demonize anybody for coming back with information which was contrary to what we were expecting. You have to welcome back information. These days, when you hear about big data and everything else, everybody seems to be running fanatically to get as much data as possible. And yes, you can understand some advantages of that. But I think it was Benjamin Disraeli, a wartime leader, that once said that, and he was right, it's the people with the best information win. So if you get information which is coming back for you, test it, question it, particularly if it deviates from your original concept of how it was going. And this is where you have to have authenticity. This is when you have to have trust in your people and allow them to express the difficulties they're going, allow them to, if they have ideas, allow them to express it. And even if it's contrary to what you're thinking, give yourself a chance to actually rationalize this. And you may need another day before you go back. And it's okay. You can communicate that to your people. Okay, it's a really good point. I'm gonna think on that. It's not how I envisioned the business running initially, but I trust you. I really want to take this away with me, and we get back to you later today, next hour, after a coffee, whatever it's going to be. But do it. I mean, listen to your people, the people that are at the blunt end. And I think community or leadership, it's not one-way communication. And you see a lot of articles, and it just seems to be, this is my message to you. This is my message to you.
Right.
It's not. Leadership is two-way communication, and your people being competent enough to talk back to you honestly, and not being in fear because it's contrary to your initial idea or your initial statement, that they will be accepted, that they have a voice. That honestly is the best advice I can give.
And that's really an amazing one. Thanks for that. And definitely in terms of rhythms, the weekly is the new daily, the monthly is the new weekly, and the quarterly is the new monthly, and the annual is the new quarterly rhythm. Rob, we come to the last question of the show and one of our favorites in the podcast. So if you would have the opportunity to meet Rob 15 years ago in your corporate career at Würth, what advice would you offer to your younger self?
This is a really good question, Mike. So I think I'd have 3 points for myself. The first point is, like you said, it was 15 years ago. Most people, in terms of upscaling, you have to recognize this will not happen overnight. It's going to be a journey. So take the time to enjoy the journey. Don't be too rough on yourself. And the more you enjoy what you do, the better you do it anyway. You're going to meet a lot of people along the way. So take the time to appreciate them for what they are and who they are. And you never know how this will come back and benefit you further down the line. I think the second point, which was something I was very slow to get good at, and that's don't sweat the small stuff. There's going to be a lot of people along the way and incidents which you feel has shortchanged you in some way. Don't get stressed about it. Just take a bigger stance and move on. The sooner you move on, it's the sooner you move on. And the last point, and all my teams know me for this point, and as my dear old grandmother used to say, God bless her, better to ask for forgiveness than permission. There will be times when you're absolutely convinced in a course of action, and you know that if you ask for permission, A, it may be denied, or B, it'll just take time, which you don't have, to get the permission. So go with your gut instinct. Just do it. And you'll have plenty of time afterwards when it was proved to be right to make the apologies or to smooth things out. So, yep, that would be my 3 points. My advice to my earlier self.
What a great way to close the show, Rob.